All right, so yesterday we started to learn about the quadratic formula, right? So we saw several examples of the quadratic formula for factorable examples, right? And we said in the real world we'd probably, well, it depends, I guess, on your level of comfort with factoring, right? If you're proficient with factoring, it's going to be much faster for us to solve using factoring as opposed to, let's say, completing the square quadratic formula. But for something like what we see here for the do now, some of us were a little bit rusty with our five-step method or our trial and error. But it also, it alleviates some of the anxiety of maybe having to factor some of the more difficult ones, some of them maybe the perfect squares. So it is definitely going to be beneficial. And what we're going to see over the next couple days after today is what happens if it's not factorable, right? And we saw some with completing the square, but a lot of the times completing the square is really not going to be the most, the simplest method. So let's recap this, and then we'll talk about what we're going to do for today. So we said the first thing we needed to do for quadratic formula is identify a, b, and c. So a is the coefficient of x squared, b is the coefficient of x, c is the constant. So my quadratic formula we said was x is equal to negative b, right, plus minus square root of our b term squared minus 4 times a times c. And we said that whole product is going to be divided by 2 times a, which in this case is 3. So I've got x equals negative 2 plus minus, and we need to really make sure that these parentheses are here. Not so much with the positive numbers, but particularly with the negatives, since I'm sure a lot of us are using our calculators. So 2 squared is 4. And again, guys, we want to be really careful with the way we evaluate this part. So again, this is just the product of these three numbers with their signs. And whatever the sign is of the product is going to be the operation sign that goes before the number. So this is negative 4 times positive 3, which is negative 12. Negative 12 times negative 8 is positive 96. So that's what this should look like. And it's all going to be divided by 2 times 3, which is 6. So I get x is equal to negative 2 plus or minus the square root of 100, which is going to give me negative 2 plus or minus 10. And at this point, we're going to split it up into our two parts, right? So one solution here is going to be negative 2 plus 10 divided 6. And one solution is going to be negative 2 minus 10 divided 6. So negative 2 plus 10 is 8 divided 6 is 8/6, which I'm going to simplify as 4/3. And negative 2 minus 10 is negative 12 divided by 6 is negative 2. So those are my two solutions, right? I'd be able to say that my solutions are negative 2 and positive 4/3. And again, guys, those are the same solutions that we would get if we were to do it using one of the other methods. Now, obviously, completing the square is not going to be too friendly here. But if you were to factor this, right, using either five-step or trial and error or grouping, if you know that, we would have 3x plus 2, x plus 2 times 3x minus 4, and then you'd be able to solve the equations to get x is negative 2 and x is 4/3. So really, we're not going to do anything that new today, right? Again, remotely, I'm trying to stretch these things out a little bit just because I know, some of the material comes across maybe a little bit differently, remotely. Obviously, you can ask questions, but they're done through the chat or through the comments. So, today we're going to do something very similar to what we did yesterday. The only difference is the equations aren't going to be in standard form. So I've got x squared minus 2x equals 15. So this is one where if I was doing this in class, about half of us would be able to catch on, and half of us are going to say something incorrect about C. All right, so the question I would ask if I was doing this in class is, all right, guys, so what's A, what's B, what's C? And inevitably someone's going to raise their hand and say, A is 1, B is negative 2, and C is 15. And then we'd say, okay, and then someone else is going to have their hand flailing in the air and say, no, I think C is negative 15. And we're going to say, all right, and some of us will be confused, and we're going to say, well, why is C negative 15? And the answer, obviously, is that this isn't in standard form, right? The quadratic formula only works as far as finding A, B, and C if we're in standard form, which means if it's equal to 0. So really what we would need to do first is we would need to move the 15. So really what this should look like in standard form is x squared minus 2x minus 15 is equal to 0. And now we know that this is going to be true. A is 1, B is negative 2, and C is negative 15. So now it's just a matter of applying the formula, which hopefully at this point we're pretty good with, right? So we've got x is equal to negative b, which is negative 2, right, plus or minus the square root of b, which is negative 2, and again, make sure it's in parentheses, minus 4 times a, which is 1, times c, which we know is negative 15, and that whole thing's going to be divided by 2a, and a in this case is 1. So I've got x is equal to negative negative 2, which is positive 2, right? Plus minus square root of negative 2 squared, which again, make sure you got the parentheses there, so that should be 4. And again, I keep stressing how careful we have to be with this part, because this is where people make mistakes, and then everything that follows ends up being incorrect. So I've got negative 4 times 1 is negative 4. Negative 4 times negative 15 is positive 60. And this is all divided by 2 times 1, which is 2. So I've got 2 plus minus the square root of 64 divided by 2. I've got x is equal to 2 plus minus 8 divided by 2. So now I should be able to split it up really easily. I've got 2 plus 8 divided 2. And one of my roots is going to be 2 minus 8 divided 2. So 2 plus 8 is 10 divided 2 is 5. 2 minus 8 is negative 6 divided 2 is negative 3. So those are my two roots. Right? And yes, I understand, right? The easiest way to do this would be to just go right here and factor x minus 5 times x plus 3. We get 5 and negative 3. We want to make sure that for the home, for today's lesson, for the homework, that you guys are practicing using the quadratic formula, because that will help when we get to the solutions that are irrational, okay? Or solutions even that are going to be imaginary, as we'll see a little bit more of tomorrow and Thursday. All right, so for something like this, we have a few different ways of doing it. So we haven't seen too many with x squared on the right side. And we could see, we do, right? I'm not saying we'll necessarily see them on the regions this year, but next year or the year after, absolutely, we will see things where the quadratic terms are on both sides. Now, if we were doing this using factoring, we would absolutely want the x squared term to be positive, right? We're going to have a really difficult time, even if it's something simple, right? Negative x squared, I don't know, plus 2x plus 15, something like that. Really hard time factoring this with the negative x squared. So what and really with the quadratic formula, it doesn't matter, right? It doesn't really matter if a is positive or negative, but in general, guys, you want the quadratic, right, the x squared term to be positive. So I'm going to pull the terms over to the right instead of the left here. So when I do that, it's going to give me 0, right, equals 2x squared minus x minus 15. And now we can establish what a, b, and c are. So clearly we see that a is equal to 2. We see that b is equal to negative 1. And c is equal to negative 15. All right, so now we're going to go to our quadratic formula. All right, we've got negative 1 plus or minus the square root of b, which is negative 1 squared, minus 4 times 2 times negative 15. And that whole thing is going to be divided by 2 times a, which in this case is 2. So negative 1 is positive 1, plus minus square root of, now the negative 1 squared is 1. And again, let's be really careful about this part. Negative 4 times 2 is negative 8. Negative 8 times negative 15 is positive 120. So that's what goes inside the radical next to the 1. And this whole thing is going to be divided by 4. So the square root of, well, I'll write it out. So we get 121 in the radical, divide 4. Square root of 121 is going to be 11. So 1 plus minus 11, divide 4. So I'll split it up, right? So one solution is x equals 1 plus 11, divide 4. One solution is x equals 1 minus 11, divide 4. So 1 plus 11 is 12, divide 4 means one root is 3. 1 minus 11 is negative 10, divide 4 is negative 10 fourths, which we can call negative 5 halves. So I'll write out my solution set up here. Right, so one root is going to be negative 5 halves, and the other one is 3. So again, this is one that was factorable. Everything we see today is factorable. I would have had x minus 3 and then 2x plus 5 when I went to solve the equations. But for a lot of us, it is going to be faster, right? Especially once we get the hang of using the quadratic formula kind of quickly and efficiently, faster for us to use the formula versus, certainly you wouldn't want to use completing the square here, but even faster than factoring for some of us. All right, so as always, guys, this is when you would give it a little pause. You would do this in your notes, and then we would unpause it. So I've got x squared plus 4x minus 12 equals 0, which means I've got a is equal to 1, b is equal to 4, c is equal to negative 12. So I've got x equals negative 4, plus minus the square root of b, which is 4 squared, minus 4 times 1 times negative 12. That's all going to be divided by 2 times 1. It's going to give me negative 4 plus minus the square root of 4 squared, which is 16. And again, I'm going to be very careful with negative 4 times 1 is negative 4 times negative 12 is positive 48. And that's all going to be divided by 2. So that gives negative 4 plus minus the square root of 64 divided by 2. That's negative 4 plus minus 8 divided by 2. I'll bring this over here. Here's my split. X equals negative 4 plus 8 divide 2. X equals negative 4 minus 8 divide 2. So negative 4 plus 8 is 4, divide 2 is 2. Negative 4 minus 8 is negative 12, divide 2 is negative 6. So those are my two roots. And again, had we factored this down, we would have got x plus 6 times x minus 2. But again, we want to make sure we practice quadratic formula so that when we see the ones that are not factorable, we'll be really proficient in it. All right, so let's clear this out and let's work on the second one. So the quadratic term's on the left, so that's definitely where we're going to move all of our terms. So that gives me 5x squared minus 19x minus 4. So now we can establish our values of a, b, and c, as a is 5, b is negative 19, and c is negative 4. So now when we go to quadratic formula, we get x is equal to negative 19 plus or minus the square root of b, which is negative 19 squared. Take this down a little bit. Minus 4 times a, which is 5, times c, which is negative 4. And that whole thing's going to be divided by 2 times a, which is 10. 2 times a, which is 5. We'll eventually get 10. So I've got negative 19, which is 19, plus minus square root of negative 19 squared, which is 361. And again, I'm going to be really careful here. Negative 4 times 5 is negative 20. Negative 20 times negative 4 is positive 80. And that's all going to be divided by 10. So now I'm looking at 19 plus or minus radical 441 divide 10. All right, so the square root of 441 is 21. So now I'm at the point where I can split it. So I'll do that over here. I've got x equals 19 plus 21 divide 10. I've got x equals 19 minus 21 divide 10. So 19 plus 21 is 40, divide 10 is 4. 19 minus 21 is negative 2, divide 10 is negative 2/10, which we'll call negative 1/5. All right, so guys, just a reminder, make sure when you're doing your homework tonight that you are in fact using the quadratic formula. Yes, I know they will be factorable, but I want you to practice using the quadratic formula. Any questions, as always, just shoot me a comment and we can have a little discussion about it, or you can get me on the weekly chat.